May 24, 1941. 6:01 in the morning. The Denmark Strait between Iceland and Greenland. The largest warship in the world is a battlecruiser called HMS Hood. She has been the symbol of the British Royal Navy for 21 years. She is 262 meters long. She carries 8 15-inch guns. She has just been struck by the 5th salvo of the German battleship Bismarck. One shell penetrates near her aft 15-inch magazine. The magazine detonates. A column of fire rises 1,000 feet. The ship breaks in two between her stacks. She is gone in under 3 minutes. Of her crew of 1,421 men, 3 survive. They are 18, and 24 years old. They were on the bow. Watch for Ted Briggs. Watch for an American co-pilot named Leonard Smith. Watch for the single biplane torpedo that crippled the most modern battleship in the German Navy. HMS Hood was a battlecruiser, not a battleship. The difference was armor. She had been laid down in 1916 at the John Brown shipyard in Clydebank, Scotland. She was launched in 1918. She was commissioned on May 15, 1920. She was, on the day of her commissioning, the largest warship in the world. She would hold the title for the next 21 years. 262.3 meters long. 47,430 tons fully loaded. 8 15-inch guns and 4 twin turrets. She had a top speed of 31 knots. She was the fastest capital ship in the Royal Navy. She was, in the 1920s newspaper phrase, the Mighty Hood. She conducted a world cruise in 1923 and 1924. She visited 42 ports across 5 continents. She showed the British flag to approximately 3 million people. She was, by 1941, 21 years old. Her decks had been planked and replanked 4 times. Her engines had been refitted twice. Her main armament had never been replaced. Her central design weakness, identified by Royal Navy gunnery analysts as early as 1923, was the thinness of her deck armor. Her main belt armor was 30 centimeters thick. Her deck armor was 7.5. A long-range battleship shell, falling at a high angle, could penetrate her deck and reach her magazine. The Royal Navy knew this. There was no time, in 1941, to refit her. Her commanding officer, on May 24, 1941, was Captain Ralph Kerr, age 49, of the Royal Navy. Kerr had assumed command in February 1941. He had been the navigating officer of the Hood from 1924 to 1926. His flag officer was Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland, age 53, commanding the Royal Navy's battlecruiser squadron. Holland had hoisted his flag aboard the Hood on April 24, 1941, exactly 1 month before her loss. On the night of May 23, 1941, Holland was in the Denmark Strait with HMS Hood and the new battleship HMS Prince of Wales, attempting to intercept a German battle group reported to be breaking out into the Atlantic. The German battle group was the battleship KMS Bismarck and the heavy cruiser KMS Prinz Eugen. They were on Operation Rainabung, a planned Atlantic commerce raiding sortie. The Bismarck had been launched in February 1939 at the Blohm and Voss shipyard in Hamburg. She had been commissioned on August 24, 1940. She was the most modern capital ship in the world. 50,300 tons fully loaded. 248 meters long. 8 38-centimeter guns, 15-inch, in 4 twin turrets. Modern fire control radar. Heavy armor in all aspects. Her commanding officer was Captain Ernst Lindemann, age 46, of the Kriegsmarine. Lindemann was a gunnery specialist. He had been Bismarck's only commanding officer since her commissioning. Aboard Bismarck on May 24, 1941, was the fleet commander, Admiral Gunther Lütjens, age 52. Lütjens was the senior German surface fleet officer at sea. He carried Hitler's personal authorization for the operation. The German plan was for Bismarck and Prinz Eugen to break out into the North Atlantic, attack British convoys, and refuel at sea from supply ships. The plan required them to evade detection during the breakout. They were spotted on May 21 by a Royal Air Force Spitfire reconnaissance photograph at the Norwegian port of Bergen. They sailed that night. They were spotted again on the morning of May 23 by the Royal Navy heavy cruiser HMS Suffolk, in the Denmark Strait. Suffolk and her sister cruiser HMS Norfolk shadowed the German group through the night of May 23, transmitting position reports by radio. The reports were received by Vice Admiral Holland aboard the Hood. Holland calculated an interception course. He committed Hood and Prince of Wales to a head-on approach toward the German group. The approach would minimize the British ships' time at long range, where their decks were vulnerable. It would also limit their firing arc. The Hood and Prince of Wales would be able to use only their forward 4 guns each, half their main armament. The Bismarck would be able to use all 8 of hers. Holland accepted this trade-off. The decision was, in retrospect, the most consequential single-command decision of the entire engagement. He hoped to close the range fast enough to neutralize his deck armor disadvantage. He did not. The German group was steaming at 28 knots. Holland's ships could match their speed but could not gain on them quickly. The closing rate was approximately 15 knots, 500 meters per minute. At 05:35 hours on the morning of May 24, 1941, the lookout aboard HMS Hood reported smoke on the western horizon. Holland ordered an increase to 28 knots and a course adjustment to close. At 05:52, the Hood opened fire at a range of approximately 25,000 yards. The first salvo was aimed at the lead ship of the German group. Holland and his gunnery officer believed the lead ship was the Bismarck. They were wrong. The lead ship was the Prinz Eugen, the heavy cruiser. The Germans had reversed their formation order 90 minutes earlier. The Hood's first 3 salvos were directed at the wrong ship. At 05:55, the Bismarck opened fire on the Hood at a range of approximately 23,000 yards. Captain Lindemann's gunnery officer, Lieutenant Commander Adalbert Schneider, conducted the gunnery solution. The Bismarck's first salvo straddled the Hood. Her second salvo straddled. Her third salvo hit. The hit was forward, on the boat deck, and started a fire among the ready-use ammunition lockers. The fire was visible at long range. The fire was the visual reference Holland's gunners used to confirm they were still seen. The fire was, in retrospect, the marker the Bismarck used to refine her aim. At 0600 hours, the Bismarck fired her 5th salvo at the Hood at a range of approximately 15,000 yards. One shell of the salvo struck the Hood near the after 15-inch magazine. The shell penetrated her thin deck armor and detonated inside the magazine. The detonation triggered the secondary detonation of the 4-inch ammunition magazine adjacent. The combined detonations were estimated, by post-war Royal Navy Ordnance Analysis, at approximately 112 tons of high explosive. The detonation occurred at 0601 minute, 23 seconds. Witnesses aboard HMS Prince of Wales, 8,000 yards behind, reported seeing a column of fire approximately 300 meters tall. The column rose for approximately 15 seconds before collapsing into black smoke. When the smoke cleared, the Hood was no longer visible. She had broken in 2 between her funnels. Her stern section had sunk within 60 seconds of the detonation. Her bow section, with its forward magazines apparently undetonated, remained briefly afloat. It pointed nearly vertical against the grey Denmark Strait sky. It then sank, also within 90 seconds. The total elapsed time from the impact of the Bismarck's 5th salvo to the complete disappearance of HMS Hood was approximately 3 minutes. Of her crew of 1,421 officers and men, 1,418 were killed. The senior officer killed was Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland. Captain Ralph Kerr was also killed. 3 men of the Hood's crew survived. All 3 had been on the upper bridge or the upper bow at the moment of the magazine detonation. They were thrown clear of the ship by the blast. The first survivor was Able Seaman Bob Tilburn, aged 24, of Leeds, Yorkshire. He had been a member of the port-side anti-aircraft gun crew. He had 30 seconds of warning of the explosion. He was on the bow. The second survivor was signal boy Albert Edward Boy Ted Briggs, age 18, of Derby. He had been on the upper bridge as a junior signalman. He had been thrown clear of the bridge superstructure. The third survivor was Midshipman William John Bill Dundas, age 18, of Edinburgh, Scotland. He had been on the compass platform. He was the most junior officer aboard the Hood. The three men did not know each other before the morning of May 24, 1941. They would, by 0800 hours that morning, be the only Hood crewmen alive in the world. Tilburn was hit by debris from the explosion and stunned. He came to in the water, approximately 50 meters from the spot where the bow had disappeared. He saw the Bismarck steaming past, 3,000 meters to the west. Briggs was unconscious for an unknown period. He came to in the water clinging to a piece of wooden flotsam approximately 20 meters in length, the side of the Hood seaplane catapult. Dundas was conscious throughout. He swam approximately 200 meters to a small Carley life raft that had been blown clear. He pulled himself onto the raft. He saw, 8 kilometers to the south, the muzzle flash of the Bismarck firing on the Prince of Wales. The water temperature in the Denmark Strait at 06:05 on May 24, 1941, was approximately 3 degrees Celsius. Royal Navy survival doctrine assumed unconsciousness within 15 minutes and death within 40. The 3 survivors were in the water for approximately 2 hours. They were rescued at 0800 hours by the destroyer HMS Electra, which had detached from a passing convoy. HMS Electra's commanding officer, Commander Cecil Wakeford May, signaled the Admiralty at 0830 hours, "Have searched area. Survivors found, 3. Repeat 3. The signal was received at the Royal Navy Operations Room in the Admiralty Building, Whitehall, London, at 0843. It was carried by a Wren signaller to the desk of the First Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Dudley Pound. Pound read the signal twice. He then walked the 70 meters from his office to the Cabinet War Rooms beneath King Charles Street. He delivered the signal personally to Prime Minister Winston Churchill at 0915 hours. Churchill, age 66, was at his cabinet desk eating breakfast, a single slice of toast and a glass of port. He read the signal. He set it down. He asked Pound, "Has anything happened to him?" Pound, by his own subsequent recollection, did not answer for approximately 4 seconds. He then said, "The Hood is gone, Prime Minister. 3 men have been recovered." Churchill stood up. He walked to the wall map. He stared at the Denmark Strait. He turned back to Pound. He gave the order that became the most quoted 3-word command of a European naval war. He said, "Sink the Bismarck." What followed, between the morning of May 24, 1941, and the morning of May 27, 1941, was the largest naval pursuit in the history of the Royal Navy. Every available capital ship in the Atlantic was committed. The home fleet under Admiral John Tovey came south from Scapa Flow. Force H under Admiral James Somerville came north from Gibraltar. Aircraft from RAF Coastal Command flew at the limits of their fuel range. Royal Canadian Navy ships joined the search. Even the U.S. Navy, still officially neutral, provided patrol aircraft from Iceland. The Bismarck, meanwhile, had been damaged in the Battle of Denmark Strait. A shell from HMS Prince of Wales, fired during the same engagement that had destroyed the Hood, had struck her port bow. The hit had ruptured a forward fuel oil tank. The Bismarck was now leaking fuel oil at a rate of approximately 10 tons per hour. She was also taking on water in her forward compartments. Admiral Lütjens, evaluating his options on the morning of May 24, decided to abandon the Atlantic raiding mission. He set course for the German-occupied French port of Brest, 1,500 nautical miles to the south-southeast. He detached the Prinz Eugen to continue the original commerce raiding sortie. The Prinz Eugen would, over the next 8 days, sink no Allied shipping. She would limp into Brest on June 1. The Bismarck, alone, made 28 knots. The British shadowing cruisers HMS Suffolk and HMS Norfolk continued to track her by radar through the day of May 24 and the night of May 24-25. At 0300 hours on the morning of May 25, HMS Suffolk lost radar contact. The Bismarck had executed a sharp course reversal. The British cruisers continued north. The Bismarck slipped past them to the south. For the next 31 hours, between 0300 on May 25 and 1000 on May 26, the British did not know where the Bismarck was. The world did not know. On the morning of May 26, 1941, at 1000 hours, the Bismarck was located by a single Royal Air Force Catalina flying boat, Catalina Z of 209 Squadron, RAF Coastal Command. The aircraft was piloted by Royal Air Force Flying Officer Dennis Briggs, no relation to Signal Boy Briggs of the Hood. Briggs's co-pilot, however, was an unusual figure for a British military aircraft. He was Ensign Leonard B. Smith, age 26, of the United States Navy. The United States was not a belligerent in the Second World War. Ensign Smith was officially serving as an observer on Catalina training flights. He was, in fact, the Catalina's actual co-pilot. He was the navigating officer who plotted the search course on the morning of May 26 that put the Catalina over the Bismarck's position. Smith spotted the Bismarck visually at 10:06 hours from an altitude of 1,500 feet. He notified pilot Briggs. The Catalina dropped to 900 feet. The Bismarck opened anti-aircraft fire at 1,000 yards. Smith, in the right-hand seat, banked the Catalina away from the AA fire and transmitted the contact report at 10:08. The position fix was accurate to within 4 nautical miles. The British search ended. The closest British capital force to the new Bismarck position was Force H, coming north from Gibraltar, under Admiral Sir James Somerville. His flagship was the battlecruiser HMS Renown. His carrier was HMS Ark Royal. HMS Ark Royal carried 15 Fairey Swordfish biplane torpedo bombers. The Swordfish was an open cockpit fabric-covered biplane that had been considered obsolete on the day of its introduction in 1936. It carried one 18-inch torpedo. Admiral Somerville ordered the first Swordfish strike against the Bismarck at 1400 hours on May 26. The strike was conducted by Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond with 14 Swordfish. The first strike, in heavy weather, mistook the British cruiser HMS Sheffield for the Bismarck and dropped torpedoes on her. None hit. Sheffield reported the friendly fire incident to Force H by radio. Somerville recovered the strike, refueled and rearmed the Swordfish, and ordered a second strike at 2020 hours. This strike was led by Lieutenant Commander Tim Cook of 818 Squadron, with 15 Swordfish. The second strike, in the gathering darkness of evening on May 26, attacked the Bismarck through her anti-aircraft fire from approximately 150 meters. The Bismarck fired with all available AA guns. Of the 15 torpedoes dropped, 12 missed. 2 struck the Bismarck's main armor belt amidships and bounced off without detonating. The 15th was dropped by Sub-Lieutenant John Moffat of 818 Squadron. Sub-Lieutenant Moffat, age 21, of Kelso, Scotland, was the most junior pilot of the strike. He attacked the Bismarck from her port quarter at 130 meters altitude. He released his torpedo at 2,000 yards range. Moffat's torpedo struck the Bismarck stern at 21:20 hours on the evening of May 26, 1941. The torpedo detonated against the steering compartment. The detonation jammed the Bismarck's port rudder in a 15-degree port turn. It also damaged the starboard rudder and the stern propeller shaft. The Bismarck could no longer steer a straight course. The Bismarck's commanding officer, Captain Ernst Lindemann, attempted to compensate by varying the speed of his 3 engines. The compensation maintained heading for approximately 20 minutes. The compensation then failed. By 2300 hours on May 26, 1941, the Bismarck was steaming in slow circles in the open Atlantic, 220 nautical miles west of Brest. She was no longer capable of reaching the safety of port. Admiral Lütjens, aboard the Bismarck, transmitted a final operational signal to Berlin at 23:30 on May 26. The signal contained 8 words. It read, "Ship unmaneuverable. Will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." The British Home Fleet, under Admiral John Tovey, had by that hour closed to within 70 nautical miles of the Bismarck's position from the north-northwest. Tovey's force consisted of HMS King George V, his flagship, and HMS Rodney. Both King George V and Rodney were modern fast battleships. Each carried 9 16-inch or 14-inch main guns. Each was designed specifically to engage and destroy German battleships in single-ship combat. Tovey planned his attack for first light on the morning of May 27, 1941. He committed his 2 battleships to direct gunnery engagement, supported by the heavy cruisers HMS Norfolk and HMS Dorsetshire and 4 destroyers. First light on May 27 was at 06:15 hours local time. The Bismarck was sighted by HMS King George V at 0800 hours. The range was approximately 25,000 yards. HMS Rodney opened fire on the Bismarck at 08:47 hours from a range of 23,000 yards. HMS King George V opened fire at 08:48 from a range of 25,500. The Bismarck returned fire at 08:49. Her first salvos straddled HMS Rodney. Her second salvos were destroyed by direct hits on her own forward fire control director and forward turrets. By 09:30 hours, the Bismarck's forward turrets were out of action. Her after turrets were firing in local control. The British battleships had closed to 15,000 yards. They were no longer missing. By 10:15 hours, the Bismarck had been struck by approximately 300 shells from the British battleships and cruisers. Her superstructure was destroyed. Her main armament was non-functional. She was burning fore and aft. She was not, however, sinking. Her armor belt remained intact. The British battleship shells could destroy her topsides but could not penetrate to her engine and magazine spaces below the main belt. Admiral Tovey, observing the engagement from HMS King George V, was running short of fuel. His battleships could not remain on station for many more hours. He gave the order at 10:15 for HMS Dorsetshire to close and finish the Bismarck with torpedoes. HMS Dorsetshire, a heavy cruiser of the County class, closed to 2,000 yards and fired 3 torpedoes at the Bismarck at 10:30 hours. All 3 struck the German battleship. The Bismarck rolled to port and sank by the stern at 10:39 hours on the morning of May 27, 1941. Her position at the moment of sinking was 48 degrees 10 minutes north, 16 degrees 12 minutes west. Of her crew of 2,221 men, approximately 400 had been killed by British shellfire during the 90-minute battle. The remaining 1,800 had abandoned ship in the final 20 minutes. HMS Dorsetshire and the destroyer HMS Maori began rescue operations at 10:45. Approximately 110 German sailors had been pulled from the water by 1100 hours. At 11:09 hours, the lookout aboard HMS Dorsetshire reported a probable submarine periscope at 1,000 yards. The Dorsetshire's commanding officer, Captain Benjamin Charles Stanley Martin, ordered immediate rescue operations to cease. Dorsetshire and Maori departed the area at 15 knots. Approximately 800 German sailors were still in the water. None of them was rescued by Allied ships. Of the 800 sailors left in the water, approximately 3 were rescued by other vessels in the next 48 hours, 3 by the German weather ship Sachsenwald, and a further 3 by the Spanish trawler La Coruña. The remaining 794 died of exposure. Of the original 2,221 men of the Bismarck's crew, 116 survived the morning of May 27, 1941. Captain Ernst Lindemann was killed. Admiral Gunther Lütjens was killed. The 3 survivors of HMS Hood, Bob Tilburn, Ted Briggs, and Bill Dundas, were the only living crewmen of the most famous British warship of the early Second World War. Able Seaman Bob Tilburn returned to active naval duty in late 1941. He served aboard the cruiser HMS Sussex through the remainder of the war. He retired from the Royal Navy in 1947 and worked as a foreman at a Yorkshire steel mill until 1985. He died of natural causes on November 15, 1995, at the age of 78. He had given exactly one published interview about the Hood, to the British naval historian John Roberts, in 1992. The interview was 12 minutes long. Signal Boy Ted Briggs returned to active naval duty in 1942. He served aboard the destroyer HMS Greyhound through the Mediterranean campaign. He retired from the Royal Navy in 1972 with the rank of lieutenant. He worked for 13 years at a Sheffield insurance company. He published a memoir of his service aboard HMS Hood in 1985. The book was titled Flagship Hood. He served as president of the HMS Hood Association from 1990 to his death. Ted Briggs died of natural causes at his home in Surrey on October 4, 2008, at the age of 85. He had been the last living member of the HMS Hood's crew of 1,421. Midshipman Bill Dundas continued service as a Royal Navy officer through the remainder of the war and the post-war years. He retired in 1959 with the rank of lieutenant commander. He worked briefly for the British Foreign Office. He died on October 17, 1965, at the age of 42, in a single-vehicle car accident on the A61 road north of Sheffield. The accident was attributed to wet weather conditions. He left a wife and 2 young daughters. The wreck of the German battleship Bismarck was located on June 8, 1989, by the American oceanographer Robert Ballard, age 46, of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Ballard had located the wreck of RMS Titanic in 1985. He had been recruited to find the Bismarck by the U.S. Navy and a group of Bismarck survivors and family members. The Bismarck was found at a depth of 4,791 meters in the eastern North Atlantic. She was sitting upright on the abyssal plain. Her hull was remarkably intact. Ballard's expedition photographed the wreck extensively over a 4-day period. The photographs were published in the journal National Geographic in November 1989. They were the first images of the Bismarck the German public had seen since 1941. The wreck of HMS Hood was located on July 20, 2001, by the American oceanographer David L. Mearns, age 45, of Blue Water Recoveries Limited, in cooperation with the United Kingdom Ministry of Defence. The Hood was found at a depth of 2,800 meters in the Denmark Strait. Her hull was broken into 3 large sections. The largest section, her bow, was approximately 100 meters long. Mearns and his team identified the cause of the magazine detonation by photographing the broken hull near the after 15-inch turret position. The break was consistent with an internal magazine explosion of approximately 112 tons of cordite. On August 17, 2015, a second Mearns expedition recovered the bronze ship's bell of HMS Hood from a position adjacent to the bow section of the wreck. The bell was raised by remotely operated vehicle. The bell, 81 centimeters in diameter and weighing approximately 190 kilograms, was conserved at the National Museum of the Royal Navy in Portsmouth between 2015 and 2017. It was placed on permanent public display in 2018. The bell of HMS Hood is, in 2026, on display in the chapel of the museum ship HMS Belfast, on the Pool of London at Tower Bridge. It is rung once each year, on the morning of May 24, at 6:03 hours. 6:03 hours is the precise time at which HMS Hood was last seen, on the morning of May 24, 1941. The bell is rung 1,418 times, once for each man of the Hood's crew who did not come home. It takes 1 hour and 12 minutes. The annual bell ringing is conducted by members of the HMS Hood Association, the surviving descendants of the men of the Hood. The association in 2026 has approximately 1,700 members. None of them is a Hood crewman. None has been since October 2008. What the loss of HMS Hood asks us, 85 years after the 5th salvo of the Bismarck struck her aft magazine at 600 hours on the morning of May 24, 1941, is the same question Pound brought to Churchill an hour later. The question was, what does a country do when its symbol is suddenly gone? Churchill's answer, given in 3 words at 09:15 hours that morning, was to sink the symbol that had killed it. The symbol was sunk 3 days later. 800 Germans died in the water. It was, in the language of post-war Royal Navy doctrine, the cleanest case of operational reciprocity in the modern history of naval warfare. The Hood for the Bismarck. 3 Royal Navy survivors for 116 Kriegsmarine survivors. The arithmetic, in this specific case, balanced. What did not balance was the silence afterward. 2,221 Germans had not come home from the Atlantic. 1,418 Britons had not come home from the Denmark Strait. 3 boys had. 3 boys is what the Royal Navy had to show for the Hood. 2 of them lived to grow old. 1 of them did not. So this is the question the Hood and the Bismarck leave us with, 85 years after the morning of May 24, 1941. When two of the most powerful warships ever built fight a sea battle that kills 3,616 sailors in 72 hours, what does the sea remember? The sea remembers two wrecks at depths the human eye does not reach without machines. It remembers the Belle that came back. It remembers the 3 boys who came back. It remembers the 800 Germans who did not. And once a year, on the Pool of London, a bronze bell rings 1,418 times. The sea, for 1 hour and 12 minutes, remembers them all.